Yes, I want to quickly talk about chapter 6 in our Winston Principle and Applications of Assessment Counseling book. First, before chapter 6 is issues related to assessment with diverse populations. And I want to kind of go over some key terms that I think are very important in this chapter. First is accessibility. And accessibility, in a nutshell, is the notion that all examinees should have observed and an unobstructed opportunity to demonstrate their capabilities of the constructs being assessed. Accommodation. An accommodation is an action taken in response to an individual with a disability in which there is a departure from the standard testing protocol in an attempt to adjust for the disability. Acculturation is a process of change and adaptation to individuals that undergo as a result of contact with another culture. Adaption is the change in the original instrument in terms of design or administration to increase accessibility to individuals. Bias testing is a term that refers to the degree to which construct and relevant factors systemically affect a specific group's performance. Intercepts in regression, it is the constant in the regression equation, or it is where the line crosses the y-axis. Modification is the changes being made that influence the construct being measured, and therefore the scores do not retain the same meaning as the original instrument. Neuropsychological assessment is an assessment of cognitive impairments, specifically the behavioral effects of possible brain injury or damage. Slope bias is a term referring to a situation in which a test yields significantly different validity coefficients for different groups, resulting in different regression lines. And universal design is an approach to instrument design with the goal of maximizing accessibility for all intended examinees. A brief overview of this chapter says that counselors can expect to work with clients from various backgrounds. Therefore, they need to be skilled in cross-cultural or multicultural assessments. When selecting the instrument, counselors need to consider the client's background and select the instrument appropriate for that particular client. Counselors also work in locations where they do not choose the assessments or the instruments, but are still responsible for administering and interpreting the results in a fair and unbiased manner. So one result that counselors may want to consider using is standards of multicultural assessments, which includes a broad definition of multicultural assessments, and it addresses issues of social advocacy and assessments. In all assessment situations, counselors need to evaluate the assessment instruments for possible bias. One area counselors should consider is whether the instrument has been evaluated for possible content bias. Content bias concerns whether the content of the instrument is more familiar or appropriate to one group as compared with another group or group. Another area counselors should examine is the instrument's internal structure for different ethnic groups. Instruments can differ in a degree to which they are reliable for. And the factor structure may vary depending on the ethnic group. The analysis of possible bias should also include studies related to the relationship between the instrument and the criterion for the different groups. It is important to examine differences among the validity coefficients and possible slope bias. Another area to examine is whether there are differences in the intercepts for different ethnic groups. Some of the instruments counselors may use may not be biased, but may still produce results that have a disparity or negative impact for some racial or ethnic group. There's a lot of debate about whether differences in ability, achievement, and aptitude tests are primarily genetic, social, or cultural. Presently, it is impossible to develop a cultural-free instrument, but many professionals are committed to developing instruments that attempt to be more culturally fair. Counselors also need to consider clients with disabilities. In assessing clients with disabilities, counselors need to review the research on the most appropriate methods for adapting the assessment for these individuals. In many settings, a counselor may be a multidisciplinary treatment team that will be involved with developing treatments for individuals with disabilities. The client may have been assessed by a vocational rehabilitation specialist or a psychologist, and the counselor will need to understand the psychological assessment report that is written. A well-written psychological report will identify any departures from the standardized procedures and will discuss how the violation may influence the results. The results from any significant departure from standard procedures should be viewed with concern. Assessment with a special population can provide useful information. It is carefully performed and conservatively interpreted. Counselors should also be knowledgeable about assessment issues related to older individuals, as this is a group of a growing segment of the population. For many types of impairments, such as cognitive or memory impairments, counselors will not be the ones conducting the assessments, but they may be part of the multidisciplinary team that treat older adults. Given the complexity of age, counselors working with geriatric clients need an understanding of the normal aspects of aging and specializing training in respect to mental health issues with this population. In conclusion, assessments with individuals from diverse backgrounds and cultures is a complex topic, and it is anticipated that this topic will continue to be debated in the next 10 or more years. The goal of an assessment is to provide pertinent information that is meaningful, fair, and accurate. This is often a challenging goal because the constructs counselors are attempting to assess are typically multifaceted. There are, however, many delicate and dedicated professionals who are attempting to address topics related to assessment with diverse individuals, and it's anticipated that in the coming decades, these professionals will make strides in leveling the playing field related to many types of assessments. So as we continue on in our journey, it's very important to recognize how diversity when selecting instruments is very important. Thank you.